Hello everyone, it's Graham Cope with another My Music. I hope you're all well. I hope you're all having a lovely day wherever you are in whatever time or in whatever place you're watching this. Today I'm going to be speaking to Minnie Birch, but first we're going to watch the wonderful video from Analog Trash. Please do enjoy it. Do go and check out their website afterwards. Thank you. There we go. Hope you enjoyed that, Minnie. We were bonding just before we came on air over my T-shirt, which is a moniker for Laura. Along with previously, it was "She Makes War" as well.
Yeah, that's right.
How long have you been following Laura?
Yeah, many years. When she was back in London, she used to host her own nights. And she put me on as like an opening act for one of her nights she did. And I'm really frustrated that the name of her, Apollo was the name of her nights. They were really good, like live music nights that she did, way back when. So I'm so terrible with time, but she's definitely been Southwest Way for like over 5, 6, 7 years, hasn't she?
Absolutely,
so,
yeah.
Maybe 10 years. Yeah, maybe longer.
And then of course, during lockdown, we needed people like her that would stream live from a room in her home.
Yeah, well, I think what was really cool about Laura is she was streaming way before any of us realised that was like a thing. Yeah,
she's been doing it forever. Yeah.
So she was really generous with like sharing, like, this is how you can do it, this is how you can set it up for like other musicians, because all of a sudden everyone was doing it, and it was just something that she'd just been naturally doing for her like Patreon group, I think, for quite some time. So she's always a bit ahead of the curve. I really admire Pen Friend. And
she's got a really great blog, which we both love, where she writes in a really it's a really personal style, but it's really creative at the same time, if you know what I mean. She's very, very clever with her use of language. Of course, you've got your own blog as well.
Yeah, it's quite sporadic. I'm one of those people that dip in and out of, there's just so many different places to sort of put stuff, isn't there? And I think some people are really good at kind of thinking, actually, I'm going to hone my skill in maybe like Laura does a lot of YouTube, like video blogs, and I think like her sort of visual storytelling is really good, whereas I sort of dip into, sometimes I feel like a newsletter or a bit of YouTube, but that's the joy of all these resources, isn't it? You can kind of dip your toe in a few different ones.
But as I look around the things that you do and the things that you put out there, what I like is about what you're doing is that, it's not all about the music. You're certainly, you're certainly a very multifaceted person with lots of different interests and angles to you, and you're putting all of that out there. It probably seems, maybe even to you, a little bit chaotic at times, does it?
Yeah, no, I'm glad that you say you like it, because I think a lot of advice you'll get around like branding yourself as a musician or like niching down to something, and particularly with things like presenting yourself on social media, you'll hear people say you need sort of 3 pillars of things that are about you, and I think there is really good advice in that, and there are people that do it really well, and sometimes you don't, if you follow an account because you want advice on audio recording, you don't really want to see about their cats or whatever. So I do get it, but you just have to be authentic to you, and I do like sharing other facets of my life, so that's just how it comes out, and it might not be the best business sense, but I guess if you're just you attract your crew of people, don't you? But I like knowing more about musicians. That's what I really like about Pen Friend's kind of vlogs. I think obviously she probably keeps a very big chunk of her life that we don't know about, but you do get this like rounded view of her life, like the fact that she's planning on moving and the kind of stresses that that's come with, and her gardening vlog, I really, really enjoyed that. I think it gave real insight into her as a storyteller. And yeah, I like those things about artists that I follow. So I just feel, as an artist myself, I want to share.
Yeah, I think it's true authenticity in a way. I mean, I get the you know, the 3 pillars thing, etc.
Yeah.
You know, I do social media as a living. That's what I do. I run a social media marketing company. You know, I help companies, brands, whatever, with their social media. But I have to say that, you know, one of the things that made me start this in the first place was that I just feel like there's so much to formula stuff out there, even when it comes to authenticity, you know. And I try and challenge people on that all of the time. Like, yeah, but is that really authentic, or is that actually just what someone's constructed as authentic because they know that will take? You know, I was challenging people the other day on a piece I wrote because, you know, people were saying, oh, well, you know, this brand does this. And I said, but look, Tata Steel own T-Pigs, right? You know, if for anyone that didn't know that, there you go. A large steel company owned T-Pigs. And along T-Pigs, that nothing wrong with T-Pigs at all, so before I get in trouble. But it's not necessarily, when you look at these brands, it's not necessarily exactly what you think it is. You might think this is some kind of artisanal kind of brand that, you know, has grown up from the countryside and, you know, 2 people have started it in a field or whatever. That's the story that might be on the back of the packet. The reality is someone's made that up for you to believe in, because then you feel like that, you know, you're generally more connected with it, etc. I like people that show all of their randomness, because I reckon that's what people are actually like. Yeah. I think that you show more of your randomness, which I think is
great. Thanks. I think yeah, I'm glad it comes across. I mean, when I guess in my head it feels like we're talking about how you present yourself on social media, and none of it's authentic, is it? Because if you've had a chance to stop whatever you're doing to take a photo and write it, you've taken yourself out of real life for a second to do the act of uploading it. So yeah, it is hard to be that way. But I think I feel as a musician, if I don't follow the rules, I can't complain when it doesn't work for me. You know, I don't have a massive following. I'm not fantastic at my own PR, but I am comfortable and happy and enjoy social media. So that feels, and maybe when I'm releasing music, I will actually try to be a bit more strategized about it, because if you've created a beautiful thing that you're proud of, it feels really silly to just all of a sudden say, I don't want to play the game of being given any advice on how to share this with people. I'm quite open to being like, give me all the advice. Like I'm happy to post at the time the algorithm wants or whatever, because I do want any tool available to me to share that. Not to the point I'd sacrifice my authenticity completely, but I'm willing to play the game of social media, like, because it's a great tool. I don't really know how to use it, but I will lean into using it when I have to in that PRE way, I guess.
But also actually, you are knowing how to use it, because if we all follow the rules and we all do things the same way, nobody stands out. Yeah. Sometimes it takes people to actually start breaking the rules a little bit to actually stand out a little bit more. Maybe that's a good thing. When did you first get started in music?
Maybe officially I got a guitar for, I think it was Christmas when I was about 12, I think, and I was really fortunate to sort of be at school in a time where like a lot of people were still listening to like a lot of grungy punk stuff, so you pretty much could learn 3 chords and start a band with your friends, so it felt like just like a really easy access. So kind of from sort of secondary school age when I really started creating and playing music.
What were some of those grungy punk songs that were prevailing that you sort of, what was the first thing you learned on the old guitar?
Oh, that's a really good question. I had Oh, what's it by? It's by a guy called, is it Frederick Node? There's like a guitar, like a picking technique book, and that's the first thing I learned
Oh,
was like
really?
some little classical pieces. But
And you thought that's boring.
yeah, and no, yeah, no, I really enjoyed, and I was really fortunate when I first got a guitar. I had a chunk of guitar lessons, and then I sort of was more self-taught and then picked up lessons again later on. But I was really fortunate because I had a teacher who immediately taught me that, and now I play very much kind of like I'm really interested in like Travis finger picking style stuff. So I feel really fortunate I was put in front of somebody who was like, you might want to learn these power chords to a Green Day song, but let's have a go at this, because I think that has shaped my style later. But yeah, I think I really don't want to say it, but I really do remember my dad getting to a point where he was like, if you play that Smoke on the Water riff one more time, I am taking your guitar away from you. I hate to admit it, but I think, yeah, I just, for the first few weeks, just played da, 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 and then eventually got from the riff to playing it as power chords. And I thought I was the absolute man, Graham. I really did. So,
you see, yeah, that's you being absolutely honest again. Nobody in the world out there that's a credible musician would actually admit to that and really? Say, yeah, oh yeah, I played Smoke on the Water. But actually, we all know that every person that picks up the guitar, the first thing they play is dun 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 dun.
Yeah, and because showing my age a little bit, but there wasn't like YouTube tutorials and stuff when I was learning guitar. So I remember like going to the music shop in town and you would buy like the Green Day official like tab book for like, I don't know, 20 quid or something, like quite a considerable amount for like a teenager or whatever. And yeah, you would learn from sort of guitar books, or at least that's how I learned.
What I want to know, very quick question in there is, did you actually know it was Deep Purple? Because obviously my generation playing that in guitar shops knew that was Deep Purple. But did you just know the song because it sounded good as a riff? But did you actually associate that with this is Deep Purple at all?
That's a really good question. My memory fails me a little bit because no, I think I was maybe just shown it as like, this is a really cool, simple
thing
riff
to do.
You could play and it will sound really cool. Actually,
I bet you had no idea.
No, I maybe didn't. Yeah,
that's so cool.
But I think there's one for every sort of generation of guitarists. I don't know what we're on now, but I think like Seven Nation Army became like a riff that like you'd show someone straight away. Like, that sounds cool.
Yeah, I would say it probably went from Deep Purple, Smoke on the Water, to Nirvana, right? There was probably, Smells Like Teen Spirit. I think most people had a go at that for a while. Yeah, Seven Nation Army, definitely. That's just so...
Yeah, like the one stringness of it. Because obviously, Nirvana's quite an entry one, but you're already moving on to more than one string there, Graham. So yeah, but Seven Nation Army, is a perfect... can teach someone to play it in like a couple of seconds and then they feel like they're doing something.
Yeah.
Which is quite nice on an instrument to instantly feel like you're creating something, I think.
Of course, I also grew up in a time where, because, I was born in 1971, so the majority of my childhood was in the sort of early 80s, whatever. I grew up in a time actually where it was all electronic music. Right. Okay. So I was kind of like harking back a little bit to, my early childhood to be playing stuff on the guitar and those sort of riffs. But so everybody was getting hold of keyboards. And I think that for a while, everybody was doing like keyboard lines rather than that. So growing up, everyone was bringing into school and was playing like either Axel F. Does everyone remember Axel F?
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, or Take On Me by a-ha.
Okay,
that was just so massive. It was just like it was just got so annoying. You'd walk into a room and everyone was trying very hard to play that on the keyboard.
Is it? Yeah, I mean, those sort of things are annoying, but it's so nice that it makes music really accessible. I remember everyone playing that chopsticks on the keyboard, and it looks super impressive, but just a really simple thing. And then, I don't know, I think it's nice for young people to instantly get that like good feedback from an instrument, and then have the frustrating struggle of getting better. Because I do like some music sessions, and I do sometimes find guitar, although it's my absolute passion, in those sessions when someone comes in who's new, if they walk towards the bass or the keyboards, I think, or like the percussion, I think, yeah, I'm going to get them feeling really proud of themselves within minutes here. When they pick up the guitar, I'm like, strap in, because actually it's not the most accessible instrument. You do have to spend quite a bit of time to get a decent sound, like a lot of stringed instruments, I guess, like a violin or a cello, or there isn't that instant. Whereas even like bass guitar, sometimes I can put little stickers on and they can just get going a bit quicker. I think if you can find things that like instantly make people feel like I can do this, it's quite nice.
Do you ever experiment yourself with kind of electronic sounds, music, gadgets? Yeah.
I'm a music tech tutor, so mostly I do that at work, and I really enjoy that element of music making, and I feel, again, that's another way of making.
Have you ever had a Damon Albarn Gorillaz moment where you've like literally plugged your drum machine in, pressed play, and like the sample, you know, the sample is the song. Yeah, isn't it great?
Yeah,
like, out the box.
Yeah, I think that is nice, because it can, if you're using like loops, it just, again, I really like that idea of like music feels really good when you dedicate a lot of time to practice and you become better at your craft and you start to really look back on your journey and are proud. But also, if it can just be really accessible off the bounce to people and be something that makes people feel really confident in themselves, because I think, because I work with adults as well, particularly, we're not very good at making mistakes always, or playing on something and feeling bad, whereas like younger children, they've got no expectation, they'll make a mistake, right? So I think if you can find ways, and I think working in like software and electric music and using loops and samples is a really quick way of making people be like, oh, I made that and it's actually really good. Yeah. So yeah, I like that.
What I like about it, I like the element of, and that's why I think we all love that clip, is clearly the beginnings of the song were there, but it doesn't become the song until you've got that creative input into it. And I think anybody that's creative, it almost goes back to the social media thing as well, because that's, you know, one of the things that I find is that I don't feel like I do people's social media. I work with people to do their social media, because it has to be a collaborative element. And I just feel like, you know, actually anybody that's creative, almost what they're looking for is the bounce off of something else. And that's what I get from that clip. He played it and then went, and he probably could hear everything else that you could do with it and then made it happen.
Yeah.
But probably only he could have done that, you know?
Yeah. And it's nice to not gatekeep that actually sometimes your creativity does come, like that was just handed to him on a plate. He didn't create that little sample. It was just like the first preset, wasn't it, or something? I did see the little clip about it, and it's nice to sort of be honest about that, I think, as well. A bit
does some of
clunky.
Your creativity come from a similar way? I mean, let's talk about your football songs, right? Yeah, I mean, in a way, they exist. You know, a lot of the reference point for that existed. Yeah, it was there in terms of football chants, etc. So you were taking something that was kind of, you know, in the commons, as it were, but then adding to it and doing something with it. I like that. You know, where did the inspiration come from?
Well, yeah, thank you that you enjoy that, because I think although I took something to do with it, it's from a long line of other people taking something and doing something with it, isn't it? So it's like, and and that's what I really like that about folk music generally. So I came to folk music by accident, of just writing and sharing music, and then as people they'll give you a genre in reviews or whatever, and people sort of saying folk artists, and I was like, oh, I don't really think I'm folk. But then getting invited to play kind of folk venues and folk clubs, and just really falling in love with that.
I think folk's an attitude. It's like rock and roll, isn't it? It's an attitude.
Yeah, a very similar one. And just falling in love with that sense of sort of community. But my story to getting involved in the football singing I'll try to make it as short as possible because it's a bit long. But essentially, I was I was ending a relationship that I was in was ending, and I had tried in some desperate way to kind of salvage it, and I decided to do this. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, like alphabet dating, where to try and spice up your life a bit. Things starting with A and you'll go on a date. I think we went to like the aeroplane museum, like the RAF museum, then like B, you do something, so you move through. Anyway, I'd got tickets to a football game to go see Arsenal ladies play, but by F, the partner had left. They'd gone. And I went to the game on my own, and I wouldn't have gone to a game particularly, but just F for football is what happened. I realised that Arsenal ladies were at the time playing in a ground quite near me, and I just really loved it. And then I got asked to, so I started to get a bit more involved in going to see football and kind of talking about it online. I got asked to play at Watford ladies at a half-time thing, and it kind of just grew from that. And the thing that I fell in love with football is like discovering this like singing on the terraces, and how like everyone just joined in, and I was like, this is an actual folk tradition. Like these people are folk musicians, but I don't think they'd call themselves that. And yeah, so I think it's quite nice that I took on this project knowing nothing about football, because I came to it through a weird route, came to it quite late on. But I think that was quite nice, because sometimes knowing nothing, you're just a blank canvas to like absorb people's views on it and their stories and what it means to them. And yeah, it was just a really interesting kind of journey for me to find out like how much people's identity and history was like all tangled up in this like supporting of a team. And I was like, this is really similar to how I feel about my like community of musicians and folk. And yeah, I just quite fascinated by the fact that it is pretty much one of the only lasting traditions we have of singing together like that, maybe outside of places of worship.
Yeah, I was going to say,
we don't really do that. And it's just, and also possibly to completely generalize about the football community, because it's very diverse, but possibly the last set of people we would consider as folk musicians.
Right. Well, I'll go beyond that. I was going to say, because you mentioned places of worship, and even if we say sort of like places of worship and people singing there, again, it's a stereotype, but you would say that it's less of a masculine type environment. You would actually say, you know, people singing at gigs, yes, you know, people come together to sing at gigs, but again, it's quite a, you know, it's maybe more people that have got a genuine that's maybe more of a cross section of society, but it is predominantly quite a masculine, or has historically been quite a masculine type of event. Men singing together, big voices around the football pitch. It doesn't happen that much, you know. And also, I guess it's when you take those people out of that situation as well. I bet that none of those people would sing in public other than there. They wouldn't do it.
Yeah. Or necessarily, from the conversations I had with you when I was making a record, consider themselves part of a folk tradition of singing in this way, that you can't get to the root of the kind of origin of that song. Like some people say, oh, just old John started singing it one day down the pub and now we all just sing it. I really love that thing of like, how did this happen? How did you start singing this? Where did this come from? Because people sing it like it's an innate thing that they've all just known.
They've just grown up with it.
Yeah, you're just looking around the stadium like, and when you go to, obviously the sort of joy and community can really be felt at like lower level, but when you go to like a massive stadium and we're talking like 80,000 people, obviously not necessarily all singing, but thousands of people singing something, that's, I don't know, that always really moves me, that sound of people all singing together. And it just can't sound bad. It just like, and I know that sounds a bit pretentious, but I really like that idea that like, it just really reminds you of like, we are like greater than the sum of our parts, because not everybody in that space is going to have what you'd call a good singing voice or be in key or in time, but there's something really like moving in me, and I'm sure you feel it too. I think a lot of us have that same feeling of like the sound of lots of voices singing is really, really powerful, and it just sounds good. It can't sound bad. And I like that. If we all just sing together, Graham, it'll all be fine. That's how I like feel about it.
I think it's why still to this day, I mean, I think, you know, massive stadium concerts, etc., you know, just have it, you know. Me and my wife actually went to see Harry Styles at the weekend over at Wembley Stadium. Yeah, very enjoyable experience. But actually, before he came on, this is possibly for me the most amazing bit of it. Sorry, Harry.
In case you're watching.
In case you're watching. But between Wet Leg and Harry coming on, they decided to play out of the speakers both the whole of Bohemian Rhapsody. Every single person in that stadium was singing at the top of their lungs Bohemian Rhapsody. It was just the most amazing thing, you know. It was actually spine tingling, and you could almost feel like that. You could actually, they panned the camera round on some of the crowd, and some people were just in tears, you know. And you don't know what's going through people's heads. But there's obviously just such a connection that people have to that song. And maybe, you know, for some people, it would actually be like a memory of seeing Queen or thinking about Freddie when Freddie did that song at, you know, years ago at Wembley or whatever. And we all, you know, as a cultural moment, how many people kind of remember Freddie at Live Aid, for example, that stands out as one of those kind of pinnacle moments. Lots of different reference points would be there that make that song and the singing together of that song so you know, emotional. But it's a wonderful thing. It really is.
Yeah. And I didn't really realize coming to football so new that a lot of people said to me, oh, it was actually like a dying art, singing on the terraces, and a lot of it was to do with more kind of safety rules, which are important about how like stadiums were laid out, so taking away, I guess, the crammed in standing areas and making it more seated. And a lot of like new stadiums are designed, I believe it's like the fancy Tottenham one, are really designed with like actually acoustics in mind and building a kind of terrace choir space and things like that. So they're a really important part of the game. And I just think we sing, the military sing, or we go all the way back to singing in the plantation fields. It's like people sing in times of turmoil, they sing in times of joy. There's something about like all singing together that is really empowering. And I don't know, perhaps that sounds a bit silly. As somebody that wasn't a football fan, I could imagine myself a few years ago listening to me say this, being like, we are talking about a football game. But it was a really wonderful little bit of oral history that isn't really happening anywhere else, or that I've found. And it's a lovely thing to discover. It's definitely got its dark side, but that's just human nature.
Would you love, I mean, look, forget, you know, number one hits and all of that sort of thing. And, you know, some of the things that music people, you know, hanker after. Would you love to be able to get one of your songs on the terraces as a piece of cultural history where it just carried on for years, and people would then for years to go, I don't know where that started, but
and that's what's really lovely about it. It's quite an egoless form of music, isn't it? But there was, and I'm being terrible now, I'm forgetting his name, I have a terrible memory, but there was, for a short time, there was a football laureate, wasn't there, who actually was paid to kind of write terrace songs. I think my interest for this particular project, although I write original music, was more about like digging up and recreating what was already there. But if somebody would like me to be football poet laureate, that would just be incredible. It would be really good. I'd love to just travel around collecting people's stories from the terraces, because I collected some stories from people and wove the audio of people talking about their relationship with football into the songs in the records, and that was just such interesting local history. I would love to be involved in a project like that. I definitely want to do more, but I called the first record I did Volume 1 because I really would like to do more. And I also came across that sticking point of I'd like to do it more collaboratively, because I think some of the songs are so local to the area that actually it's more important that they're sung in the correct accent or by people with a link to that area. I think
Which area are you in? Which area are you in?
I'm in Hertfordshire.
Hertfordshire.
So I'm like Watford way. Yeah. So I don't think anyone's precious about football songs, and teams steal them from each other and really change them. But I felt a thing of like it would be nicer to involve more people from the areas, because it feels like people's local history to rework the songs. And it definitely felt like I did a Newcastle song and I thought this really should have been in the accent, because it's kind of part of it, if that makes sense.
I love this. I'm going to try and connect you afterwards to Aziz Ibrahim, who has done cultural work with music.
Oh, cool.
And maybe he can offer some advice about how to
get I'd love that. Thank you.
Into all of that sort of thing, because I think it's great. I think, if you've got a passion for that kind of link between history and music, I think that's a wonderful thing. Where, in terms of your own music, where's that going now?
Well, yeah, it's I suppose an easy question and a tricky question. I'm just writing. I've just got back into gigging. I unfortunately took a considerable chunk of time out because I was quite unwell, and I've just got back to performing live. And actually, I wasn't sure when I was diagnosed if I actually would be able to play again. So I had some surgery on my arm. So at the moment, I'm just sort of in a dreamlike state to be back playing music and creating music.
But taking it steady with yourself.
Yeah, I guess. Well, there's just that. It's quite strange because I have so much gratitude to just be making music, but there's also that bit of me that had to stop a career that I'd worked really hard on and that was really gathering some speed, and I was getting really lovely opportunities. And it does feel, like I have been pushed a bit back down to the bottom of the hill. So I have this mixture at the moment of just immense gratitude for where I am, mixed with quite a bit of frustration of wanting to close that gap a lot quicker than realistically the gap can close. So yeah, I just want to just keep writing and seeing where like the music kind of takes me, because I think if you just focus on creating things, hope the opportunities sometimes come. I know you do have to work hard for those, but I think that's the bit that I can control at the moment. So I'm just focusing on just really joyfully making things.
We've had some lovely ladies from the folk community on here in the past year or two. Is there anyone in particular you'd love to work with? We've had Eliza Carthy on here. We've had Angelina Morrison on here. Is there anyone that you'd love to get together with?
Oh, that's a really good question. I've not done like a great deal of collaborating in my time. I've had like chunks of it where I've worked in projects. But actually, you've had them on the show as well. But an artist I really, really admire is Mifa Queen. I admire the way that she writes, and I would love to have an opportunity to work with her more. I love the things because she works in like theatre and things like that. So yeah, the idea of like collaborating with more people would be really good. But yeah, if Eliza Carthy's looking for a support artist or backup guitarist, I'm not going to say no. But yeah, I think that's...
Well, it actually, in some ways, it's more part of the folk community than it may be in, sort of like other areas of music, which is it. I never see it quite so much as sort of like a collaboration. It sometimes in sort of like pop world or whatever, it's like, this record is this person versus this person or what, and it almost feels like kind of a versus. It's like we put these people together to sell, but I just feel in the folk community it kind of feels like more of a natural conversation. It's part of the conversation, which is that you want to discover the lineage of this, or you want to discover where this comes from, and people start looking at this at the same time or talking about this at the same time, because you've got to talk to people in order to find stuff out. And then people happen to work together because they're talking, and that just seems much more natural. So,
yeah, and I guess in the real traditional folk clubs, or people that have kind of grown up making their music in that way, they'll have been involved in sessions. So the idea of just jamming in a room with other musicians is really natural. So you've probably played with handfuls of actual musicians.
absolutely.
So to approach them to be involved in something isn't as strange. You get a feel for if you work well with someone. Yeah, it's a very accessible community in that way for like networking without it feeling like formal networking, because there's so many opportunities to literally just play your instrument with other people.
I used to go to a folk club every week, and you literally just you didn't sort of like one after the other take to the stage. It was almost kind of one person was on the stage and they did a couple of songs, and then you'd go up and join them and join in, and then it was just kind of like you're kind of swapping in and out, and it was fine.
It's quite an egoless way of doing things, community, which I really like. It doesn't feel, I mean, I like a traditional gig with a support act and a headline or whatever, but I do like the chaotic randomness of the folk world. Well,
I'm going to tag those people in, see what happens.
Thanks, appreciate it.
You never know. If you're watching, folks, and I'd keep in touch with all of those people as well. If Minnie's up for a bit of rehabilitation, stroke collaboration at the same time, which would be nice. Sometimes that's quite a good way of actually bridging that gap. Which is to work with other people.
Yeah, no, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. That is something that I've thought a lot. I've even thought about reaching out to people for maybe some kind of guidance or like mentoring, because I think sometimes when you've had a challenging diagnosis with an illness as well, that can sort of make you feel a bit wobbly about your whole identity. And so kind of getting back to just who you are, it is nice to have. And I am fortunate to be surrounded by, but it is nice to have like a force field of people who are kind of helping to lift you up during that time.
And sometimes it's nice to work with people that have had that experience somewhere in their career before and have gone through it, and and just get that help and support and stories. Minnie, you've been a lovely guest. Thank you. We could have talked about all sorts of other things like your prison work and everything else as well. We could have talked about that. We could have just please don't neglect to go and have a look at Minnie's blog after this, because there's so many aspects to her life that are on there. I feel that you're an incredibly generous person with everything you do, and I think that's a wonderful thing to have in your armor, as it were. And I wish you all of the success with that.
Thank you.
Please do go and check out Minnie's. She's got links to everything off of her website. Is it minniebirch.com?
Or .co.uk. I think they both head there. Yeah.
So do go and check that out. If you've enjoyed this, please do go and share it with your friends, family, or whoever else might be interested. Not for me, but for the musicians that come on. As I always say, if you've enjoyed this, it's my music. Do make a note of that and share it. If you haven't enjoyed this, then this has been Farmers Weekly time, where we've been discussing the latest technology for wheat shearing. And until next time, bye for now.